Welcome to In the Studio. My name is Hamza Nakhal. Today we speak again about the Egyptian revolution. And we'll jump right into it. President Morsi, who used to be part of the Brotherhood, on November 22nd, issued a decree to give himself a lot of force to recuse himself from any judiciary questioning. And so many things followed after that. So I'm going to ask my guests today to tell us where the Egyptian revolution is going. Where are we and where are we going? So I'll start with Ashraf, and then anybody can jump anytime.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Dr. Hamza. So I think the situation now, definitely, when we take a look at the news coming out of Egypt, is very fluid. And it's quite surprising to see where President Morsi is at this point. When we compare the President Morsi that visited Tahrir Square right after the results of the elections and where he stands today, it's definitely a very surprising situation. And I think a lot of it has actually been created by his own decisions, and some of which were, as we take a look at it from where we're sitting, it seems to be that they were lacking some key advice from some of his key advisors. So I do hope that we see him coming out and creating a dialogue that does not exist today, especially with the opposition side.
Imam Aziz.
Just wanted to, first of all, thank you for inviting us to the show. It's a privilege to be given a chance to speak a little bit about Egypt. I totally acknowledge that the constitutional declaration of President Morsi certainly gave him, the powers of a pharaoh, as they say. And it is always bad news when you don't have any judiciary oversight, on the executive branch. On the other hand, and I'm not saying this to justify what he did, I am saying this to pronounce my understanding and comprehension of the political circumstances under which he was, I think, compelled to do that, is that the judiciary in Egypt, as we know it, all the judges in Egypt have been appointed by Mubarak. Most of them are not actually known to be for further great integrity. And time again, they blocked decisions that were favorable of the revolution, that were moving the country forward. They dissolved the parliament and so forth. And there were all kinds of rumors that they were planning to dissolve both, the Shura Council, the upper house of the legislature, and also the Constitutional Assembly that is writing the Constitution. And I think preemptively what the president did was that he wanted to provide himself with those powers in order to protect those decisions. And even though I disagree with the process itself, but I understand where he was coming from. It's a fight on corruption. It's a fight on the remnants of the Mubarak regime, and it's going to be ugly no matter what.
I think I kind of stand somewhere in between these two perspectives, because I understand where Ashraf is coming from in terms of the difference between Morsi of June or July and the Morsi of today. And there's this clear, stark difference between the words that he was saying and the terms he was using and the type of terminology altogether. And his communication was very, very different than what we see in the past few weeks. But I'm also seeing what my dear friend Imam Aziz is saying, or Muhammad Aziz is saying, that there was a circumstance in which the president had to make certain decisions, whether it be that these forces, the Supreme Court, was going to take those actions or not is unclear. And that's where I differ with Muhammad, because there's no evidence that particularly links the Supreme Court to this pending decision to dissolve the upper house, as well as this, the constitutional the team to revise the constitution. But B, there's also been a long-standing fight for corruption versus this potential change. And we do know Mubarak cronies are definitely going to try to hold on to as much power as they possibly can. But what I'm seeing, and this is my own personal perspective, is that perhaps the threat of what Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood are seeking to do could be similar to that which was occurring during the Mubarak regime. And that could be that this absolute power status could perhaps hinder the ability to create change. And in terms of the Supreme Court and Morsi specifically, there have been clashes. We saw that when he was trying to dissolve the Supreme Court was trying to dissolve the parliament. We see that now because the parliament is the one that created the group of the members that will redraft the constitution. Half of those members are of the Muslim Brotherhood. And that doesn't speak to what Egypt looks like right now. And so there's a concern that the Supreme Court, that concern, it's an understandable concern, but we have no evidence linking directly to that possible issue.
And these are good points. I think I would add to that is that if a president of a country had made such declarations in times of peace when there's no turmoil, we would have automatically assumed that is pushing the country into the direction of tyranny and dictatorship. But knowing the revolutionary state of Egypt right now, and Morsi, above all, knows all too well about that, I don't think that he would have gambled by issuing decrees that would only further his power and make him into a pharaoh under such circumstances when we had hundreds of thousands of people that already are surrounding the presidential palace right now as we speak. So I'm not. That's why I'm not concerned, because there is so much political movement in Egypt right now and political action that would certainly block the Muslim Brotherhood from pursuing further power. But I think that this is not an isolated problem. This is part of a bigger issue, and that is there are, in general, among Egyptians and other people, there are these concerns and really justified concerns about the role of Islam in politics and the Muslim Brotherhood in general as a movement. And I think if it was any other group, I think if Mohammed Baradei was the president and he issued such decrees to block the Mubarak judges from furthering the cause of the revolution, I think many people would have been okay with it. But it's because Morsi represents something that is much bigger, and that is the shadow of the Muslim Brotherhood. I think that is why people are concerned, and for good reasons.
And go ahead, please.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, just to build on that, I think what President Morsi, I think the biggest mistake I see happening is the fact that they seem to be in a rush to achieve political wins, which I think the Egyptian people in general, when you think about the average citizen, they are looking for economic changes,
Absolutely,
first and foremost, and second, they are also looking for human rights changes in terms of how the Egyptian citizens being treated in their own country. And I think President Morsi has really stepped on a lot of those steps in order to achieve political gains, which to me again shows that there is a level of political savvy that is not existing today at his level, at the level of his cabinet, that essentially brought about this decree that he issued, which I thought, given the political capital that he had by winning an election and being the first Egyptian president voted in after the getting Mubarak out of office, that he could have really made use of that political capital for a long time to come, and went through the process of coming up with a constitution that pleased the majority of Egyptians, but thinking that he can, by using a dictatorial model of behavior, to cop out of the hard work of really working with all the political forces in Egypt, really resulted in backfiring for him and everybody that is working with him.
Yeah, I really agree, because he divided the country really. He was doing okay. Once he brought this decree, the whole country is divided in two sections. And I don't think really there is no justification whatsoever to follow the footsteps of Mubarak. He's doing exactly what Mubarak used to do. So I do not agree with the decree, even though I think he without it he would have been okay. Another issue that I'm really dissatisfied with is the passage of this constitution, which is all overnight thing, just like drive-by thing, just get it really quick. And now there are a lot of things that are not really good looking in this constitution. How do you guys look at this constitution, even though it might be much better improving of what we had before, but it could have been a whole lot better than what we had.
Right. Well, look, I disagree with many articles of the draft. I read it thoroughly, 3 or 4 times. But I think that the characterization of passing this draft as something that was done overnight, I'm not sure if that is accurate, because they have been discussing this for months. The voting process took one day, yes, but the discussions behind every article have been ongoing for the past 2 or 3 months. So it is not something that was passed overnight. That is number one. Number two, just looking at the bigger picture, from a political science standpoint, that's my background. Countries that transition from military rule to democracy, almost always, this is a consistent behavior of most populations. They almost always vote very, very conservatively in the very first election cycle after their revolutions, right? We've seen this in Argentina, we've seen it in Paraguay, we've seen it in Brazil. And if you actually read the articles of the very original draft of the Constitution, it was always a compromise, a power play compromise between the most conservative political party and the military, right? And I think this applies to the existing draft in almost every sense.
That could absolutely be true. I do see that point about them. I think President Morsi did, and we're all sort of sitting in amazement in terms of what type of arrangement he did with the military. So I think maybe in the back of his mind is that the military is now on my side. I don't have to worry about that. And consequently, I can basically roll over the political forces and get to the end point with a new constitution. I think it's the manner in which this whole process is happening, even though I did read the document just to make sure I can come here and say I read it, and also to make sure that I do the due diligence in terms of what's written in it. I think a lot of Egyptians, once they read the document, they will, for the most part, agree to the most of what's written in there. And I think that the differences could be minor if, again, the political forces come together and come to an agreement and really achieve that change. So it's again the process in which you build that political alliances and agreements among people, so that you really get to the end result, which is a constitution that all of Egypt would approve of. And I'm saddened to see him losing a lot of that political capital and the opportunity to work with all these forces. Now we see the Mubarak regime remnants, as well as the revolutionaries, coming together opposing Morsi, which is not a situation we would have hoped for. But that's the situation, again, with his decree. He basically left people to wonder, what side should we be on, and what is going to get us to a political process. Again, that's really what's causing a lot of anguish for a lot of people, is the manner in which, even though, as Imam Aziz said, there were a lot of discussions. Again, the perception is the discussions were primarily happening with the majority of people coming from the MB as well as the Salafists, without really enough representation from other groups. And again, that could be a perception and not reality. And I think the challenge that President Morsi faced was, how can he influence that perception and change it in the mind of the average Egyptian citizen? Because that's the step that he failed to achieve.
Right. And the very same problems that Ashraf actually presented, the fact that he divided the country and now you have all these forces that are rallying up against him, actually that provides me with reasons to feel more comfortable, because that means that the Egyptian people are not gonna accept humiliation anymore, right? From Mubarak, from the military, from the Muslim Brotherhood, it's not going to happen. People are going to stand up, they're going to rise, irrespective of the results of the upcoming referendum, whether people say yes or no to the Constitution. I think that's just step one. A lot of work still is going to be done afterwards. You have parliamentary elections. This Constitution, I think, will be actually modified many, many times in the next 10 years, so it adjusts itself gradually to the true feelings and aspirations of the Egyptians.
I am actually more concerned. President Morsi eliminated the military.
Which was a big move.
Now he's also eliminating the judiciary. I mean, people who have different opinions, people who do not agree with him, just get him out of the way. And now with all his this current presidential decree, I mean, no one can say no to him. He can do anything he wants. So I'm really concerned. I mean, he's eliminating all and that's what every tyrant does. That's what every dictator do. They just eliminate everybody, so you're the only one, and then...
But tyrants operate with total impunity. I don't think this is going to happen in Morsi's case at all.
Well, that's
They're
the
not
next
going to
step.
let him. That's my
That's
point.
the next step. I'm worried that that might be the next step.
I mean, people now protest about the smallest things.
He's just eliminating. He's eliminating all opposition right now.
Well, I think right now, what we have to take into consideration from the very beginning is Morsi was only elected in the primary election with 20% of a vote. That means 80% of Egyptians did not see Morsi as the best fit as the president.
And his majority was 1%.
And then exactly when we reached the general election between the top contenders, we saw that Morsi was what people called the lesser of two evils, because they were concerned that the other candidate was backed by the Mubarak regime. So obviously you have an old regime and what many people called the new regime. And they're concerned that with this election, they have to kind of figure out what they're going to do, whether they're going to continue, they're going to sell out their entire revolution, or they're going to bank on this candidate to hopefully propagate the change that they're looking for. They're really putting a lot on the line there. So they will hold him accountable. And I have to agree with Mohammed that these votes are critical. He gained the vote of many of the revolutionaries. He certainly did not gain the vote of those that were supportive of the Mubarak regime. And now he's added, there's still, I think, almost half of the Egyptian population did not vote entirely. So he's risking a lot by putting out a decree like this and not particularly giving the best explanation or demonstrating the real reasoning for why he's doing something like this on the short term. It was really bad PR, and I think we can all agree on that. Mm-hmm. And then putting out a constitutional referendum with, although 6 months worth of work into it, almost an overnight a vote on that, especially when most of the people that were present for the vote were of the Muslim Brotherhood. That is not representative of the folks that voted for Mohammed Morsi in the general election. And he is risking way too much by making hasty decisions that do not represent Egypt.
So in eventuality, it's either he's sincere and he's moving the country into the direction of democracy, in which case we're satisfied, or, as Sarah said, he did himself and the Muslim Brotherhood tremendous damage, in which case he will not be re-elected, and that is also good news for Egypt. So that's why, like I said, I'm still hopeful about the whole thing.
So the question I think we should be asking ourselves is, what should President Morsi do now? And does he have any political capital that he can count on? And I think he might, but this will really depend on what he does in the next few days. I think the fact that everybody got so consumed by the political process was definitely the wrong focus area for a population that's been asking for better economic conditions. This is the type of focus that we should be having from the president and his cabinet, that this is what they should be doing, is establishing stability that will allow the IMF to help Egypt, the European community to help Egypt, the United States government to help Egypt, and for the Egyptians themselves to help themselves. There's a lot of money that Egyptians have outside Egypt that they could be sending into Egypt. There's a lot of potential within Egypt that can be unleashed. And by having us waste so much energy and time on a political process that should take its own time so that everyone builds enough buy-in for it, that's what we need to achieve, not necessarily fight over a constitution or fight over the elections. I think this process, we should all know, it's going to take time, as we were discussing before coming together for our discussion here, how long it's taken the American people to really finalize their constitution. It's going to take a number of years. And by him rushing it through the door is only going to have everybody screaming, wait a minute, when everybody else is still screaming, I don't have food to eat, everything's too expensive, I don't have a job, I don't feel secure in my home. So President Morsi needs to shift his gear, really focus more on the long-term economic stability of the country, and then let the political process take its pace. I think he may have a chance if he really comes through that process and do that. Otherwise,
I really do agree with you.
Yeah.
I've watched the show in Egypt where they from Mahalla, where those farm labor probably own small lots of land. So it's not a big, and they live really way below poverty line, way below. I mean, they just really have almost nothing. They just live on day to day, and they really don't care about all this constitution, all that. They just want to provide food for their children. That's all they want. They're not even looking for medical care or good clothes or car or any of that stuff. They just want to provide food. So they don't really care. That's why at the end of the line you say the vast majority of the voters in Egypt will not read the constitution. They will not even know what constitution means. So it really, I agree, it just put emphasis now improving the economic situation of most people.
Right, but
and the thing is, this decree, if you notice, the Egyptian stock market went $5 billion in the first day.
Losses.
It lost a lot.
Lost a lot.
Yeah.
Why we begging everybody to?
But then and I dare to disagree just a tad bit here. There is no possibility whatsoever to start a process of economic development without laws.
Certainly.
And in order to have laws, and legislations that are proposed by lawmakers and so forth, you need a legislature. And in order to have a legislature, you need a constitution. You have to define the country and define the law of the land first. So I actually think that writing a constitution is the most pertinent and the most important step to be done. It may be true that most people, just want to focus on the economy and create the creation of jobs, but you cannot achieve that without having a law by which this land abides by. So it's a chicken and egg, kind of situation.
We can certainly see that because from the day that the revolution in January 25th of 2011 began, the Egyptian economy has tanked even further than it was before the revolution. So that clearly demonstrates what Mohammed is saying here, that with a lawless society in which there are unknown powers and to whom those powers belong, people just cannot take this society seriously. They can't invest in it. They certainly can't continue to build, or as we've seen within internal Egyptian economy, they've been building kind of erratically and have been doing things because they're taking advantage of this lawless society. But any outside investment, any major improvements to our economy simply will not happen until we have a sound Egyptian political system. And it's unfortunate, because you will still have those people from places like Mahalla that you're saying, which is, a village in the outskirts of the farmlands in Egypt. Those people were among the major people that went and protested against Morsi's decree. So it kind of ties back, these two things are very, very tied to one another. It is the economy, but without a constitution, without laws, without rules that establish the framework within this economy can thrive, we simply cannot see improvement in Egypt's economy.
I don't mind we establish constitutional, but that's taking all our effort. There is no effort go. I mean, we can get everything going together. Why we're only focusing on the elite. We're forgetting all these poor people in the countryside. This is the vast majority of the population, which we really need to focus in. We're not focusing on those people. Those are people who are really harmed the most. And we're only focusing on the elite. We want to consider those elite people down in the square, down in Nahda Square, and we're not moving forward. The rest are really starving. Tourism is down, industries, a lot of factories closed down because there is high employment. It's just going down. Why we're not focusing on this?
Because politics is controlled by the elite. And the elite is ideologically oriented. And ideology matters to them. There are Muslims and Christians in Egypt. There are conservatives and liberals in Egypt. There are left-wing and right-wing in Egypt. So the manner by which the constitution is written and the articles of that constitution and the ideology that it actually reflects matters a lot to all of those political elites. And, the nature of any political process is that, that they care more about the advancements of their political careers than they care about the aspirations of the average individual. And I think, in this country, we can all attest to that.
Yes.
And so I say, going back to what Ashraf was saying earlier, what is it that President Morsi needs to do? In all honesty, from a pure political science standpoint, putting myself in his shoes, he does not have any choice but to keep moving forward and to sit down possibly with some of the opposition leaders and make some compromises a little bit. And the constitutional declaration will be suspended in a couple of weeks anyway. If the Egyptian people voted no on the constitution, most likely a new constitutional assembly will be created that will be a little bit more reflective of the political forces in Egypt. So I think that'd be a good thing. It is what I would vote for. And if it passes, then I think political forces need to sit down, prepare for the parliamentary elections, and get engaged into the political process and start working. Get to work as political parties, as individuals, as elite. And it's two parallel processes. Working on a modification of the Constitution itself, adding articles, removing articles, making adjustments, and providing legislations and laws that will regulate the country in this upcoming year, so that we start attracting investors, so that there are laws, there is security, and there is a process, and there's accountability. The judiciary will be established, and then the country moves forward. This is going to take a couple of years of turmoil, but we just need to be patient with it.
I actually disagree with what Muhammad's saying here. He's saying we need to move forward, we need to just keep going with the plan as it is. I'm concerned that most of the people that were in the Constitutional Assembly that drafted the Constitution, or those that did, half of them were not there to vote for this. So that half may not be representative of Egypt. And for them to put those articles and say the whole Constitutional Assembly agreed is definitely not true. And for them to say, we're going to provide 15 days from that vote for people to read the Constitution, to find out what they think, to learn from others what they're voting, and then to go and vote is completely and utterly impractical. What I would recommend is extending the deadline for which we're going to, or extending the date of the election, providing an opportunity for the people that were not present at the vote to perhaps revisit and sit down, and whether those opposition parties want to or not, they're going to be at the table because they have to sit there and represent the voices that may not have been heard at that vote. And we need to see whether there are other additional things that needed to be addressed or things that need to be removed. Of course, there's still going to be those ideological disagreements, but at the end of the day, a constitution must be put out for the people to vote upon. And the people can vote whether they agree or disagree with those ideologies. But 15 days is unacceptable. We do need an extension.
Sarah's perspective is a normative perspective. It is describing how things should be.
You know what?
And I totally agree with her,
Yeah.
but reality states otherwise. The U.S. Constitution was written in 11 years by a dozen guys. Yeah. The American people were not consulted. The German Constitution was written by the U.S. military. And that is the case. And then populations take years.
Our time is almost over. And I want to thank you very much. Thank all the audience also. This is a very long subject. Probably one half an hour is not gonna really give it a justice. So hopefully in the next time we can invite you again. We continue on the same discussion.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you very much.
Thank you.